Hello and welcome, Radio Zindagi listeners. A very good afternoon to all of you. This is RJ Vedika bringing you yet another episode of Illuminating Mind Matters with Basant. This is a show where we talk about the things which needs to be discussed, which needs to be talked about in the community, the very important topics which we shy away from, but we should discuss. So, Basant is basically the short form of Bay Area South Asian Network of Therapists. It's a non-profit organization raising awareness and advocating for the mental health issues that affect the South Asian community. They help the community members with educational resources and help them connect with culturally competent mental health professionals. If you would like to know more about Basant, the best way is their website, which is basantnow.org, or you can write to them info@basantnow.org, or just give them a call. 510-770-6223 would be the number. With that, let me bring the host of the show, Shalini Dayal, who is a marriage family therapist. Hey, Shalini, how are you doing today?
I am good. Thank you, Vedika, and thank you for hosting or letting us host this show. Hi, Radio Zindagi listeners. I'm Shalini, and I'm your host today on this episode of Illuminating Mind Matters. And today, I am very privileged to have two wonderful guests with me, Bindu Fernandez and Prabha Vishwanathan, who work at Narika. And they will be talking about the role of Narika in domestic violence, and especially in the South Asian community, which is very important. Bindu is the executive director at Narika, a Bay Area nonprofit serving survivors of domestic violence since 1992. She is a trained sexual assault, domestic violence, and human trafficking counselor and is focused on the intersection and evolution of domestic violence with our various identities, including culture, gender, and faith. Prior to Narika, Bindu was a small business owner and a senior policy expert at Google. So welcome, Bindu.
Very nice to be here.
Thank you. And Prabha, she is a domestic violence advocate at Narika. She started as a volunteer at Narika in 2019 and is now an employee there. The interest in volunteering at Narika stemmed from a need to help a friend, and she found her calling here. As a new immigrant to this country 29 years ago, Prabha realized that immigrants like herself lacked empathic support and guidance during a time of crisis. The urge to help vulnerable women in a time of crisis has been the motivating factor to work in this field. So, welcome, Prabha, and thank you both for making this time for us. So, I would like to start with knowing a little bit about what is domestic violence and what are some of the forms of abuse and control that you both see.
Before I explain what domestic violence is, Narika was started in 1992 by a group of immigrant women who felt that women in especially South Asian community did not have support. And that's the reason why they started Narika. And still now, 29, 30 years later, we're still here and supporting South Asian women and women from other community too. So to go ahead and explain domestic violence, domestic violence or intimate partner violence is a pattern of behavior used by one partner to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship.
Okay, well, so what are some other forms of abuse along with physical abuse, emotional abuse? I mean, do you see from your clients that come into your organization? And also, what are the ages that you serve?
Mm-hmm. So, of course, when we talk about domestic violence, the first thing that comes to our mind is physical violence. Mm-hmm. But we all know that it's more than that. So as far as age group is concerned, we have, I think, anyone over the age of 18 and above. Our oldest client is in her 70s. all these clients have faced more than one form of abuse. And to talk about different forms, I want to start with verbal abuse. Verbal abuse can involve harsh criticism, condescending remarks, and accusations, blaming, and even even withholding, like silent treatment, right? Um, and when I talk about condescending remarks, it's like, oh, I'm sure you put a lot of time and effort into wearing makeup, but please wash it off before someone else sees it, and that kind of remarks. And then our clients go through very severe emotional abuse, like humiliating in public, gaslighting, accusations of cheating even when the partner is not involved with anyone else but their husband or the partner.
Okay.
And also, it's constantly, sometimes there's even threat of committing suicide. Oh, it's so horrible to live with you that I'm going to commit suicide. So these are like different forms of this, and even more different forms of emotional abuse that our clients go through. Bindu, do you want to take on the
Sure.
next?
Some other forms of abuse that we see commonly are financial abuse. This is a big one that kind of goes through is experienced by many survivors of domestic violence. This can include things like being denied basic needs, credit cards or debt that is incurred in the survivor's name, medical bills that aren't paid. All of these financial forms of coercion and control happen. Sexual abuse, reproductory abuse, marital rape, these all other forms of abuse that happens within relationships as well. Immigration facilitated abuse is a big one that we continue to see, and Narika specializes in, where a survivor by their abuser maybe said things like, I will not let you renew your H-4 visa, or I won't let you get a work permit, or I won't file your green card. And these are all ways that immigration also plays a role in domestic violence as well. Of course, some of the newer trends we're seeing in domestic violence and abuse is related to technology. We see GPS trackers, email hacking, social media hacking, cyber harassment. These are all ways that now technology facilitated abuse is ongoing and continuing. And maybe one of the other forms of abuse we see is medical, where an abuser may choose to deny medical care or prenatal care, or not give their spouse medical insurance, and other ways that you are denied your basic needs, including medical, food, etc.
Both Bindu and Prabha, that was very detailed explanations, and thank you for those explanations on different kinds of abuse for our listeners to know about. When people access your organization for services, what's the process?
Okay. The process is they call our helpline, or they can reach out at narika@narika.org. And our helpline number is 1-800-215-7308. But they can also reach us through our website, other than website, our social media accounts. And sometimes survivors are introduced by friends or family members, or other organizations. So they can reach us too. And social media, they can reach us through Facebook or Instagram. And all you can follow the social media accounts where we share all our events, programs, information about domestic violence, and the way the community can support Narika.
And what can someone expect once they call Narika and say, I need help? Mm-hmm. What is the process? What happens?
Yeah. So when they call our helpline or send us an email, mm-hmm. One of the advocates like myself, we call the client back and we do an intake. And when we say intake, all, their name and number and whatever. And then we start talking about the kind of abuse that they are going through. And we gauge how severe it is. Is it, if they are in a very violent relationship and it's not safe for them to live at home, would it be good for them to go to a shelter? And if the client agrees, we place them in shelters where, these are domestic violence shelters. So no one is aware of where they are put up, and it's a safe place for them. And then we have ongoing case management for them. When we say ongoing case management, after that, if they need legal support to either file restraining order or divorce, child custody, spousal support, we connect them to legal resources.
Okay, that is good to know. So thank you, Prabha, for explaining that. So what the process is and what one can expect. I also wanted to know what are some of the challenges that are faced by the immigrant survivors of domestic violence, especially in the South Asian community?
Yeah, so like Bindu said, immigration is a really big problem, and our clients are scared of leaving the relationship for the fear of losing their H4 status, right? Once divorce happens, it's very easy for, it's just the H4 disappears, and then for getting a legal status is not going to be as simple, right? And the other thing is, in South Asian communities, there's isolation. One, most of us who come here don't have family, so they fear, as it is there, a lot of the domestic violence victims are isolated. And then on top, if they leave home, they are scared, they fear isolation even more, because the few friends, they're worried that the few friends and family who they are connected to, they might lose them. And also, there is still a stigma around divorce and not living with your husband. I think, yeah, and that also many of our clients face pressure from the family, suggesting that it might not be a good idea for them to leave the husband, right? So, and that's a very common thing that that our client thinks about a lot. I don't want to be not married, right? Yeah. And many of them ask, okay, if I file restraining order, then what happens to my marriage? Can my husband still come back home? Even if it has been a physically violent relationship, they fear that their marriage is going to break, right? And Bindu, do you want to add anything else to that?
Sure. I think there's a big fear of law enforcement as well within our immigrant communities. We see this very often, that your recent immigrants or your immigrant community does not want to involve law enforcement in any of their issues. There might be issues happening at home, but domestic violence is still seen as a family issue, not an issue that someone else in the outside world needs to intervene in or support. There's a real fear of deportation when they involve the authorities. Often in many of the cases we see, and what Prabha and all of our team works with, are cases where the children are US citizens and the survivor is not a US citizen, all of which adds on to the fear of, if I involve law enforcement, if I involve the authority figures, I will get deported. And what does that mean for my family and my children and so on? And I think a real other issue that comes up for our survivors, especially our API community, is language barriers. I think there's a study that says 1 out of 3 Asian API or Asian Pacific Islanders in the US have limited English proficiency. And therefore, that is one of the ways that Narika really supports in having a lot of languages that are non-English, where someone can receive services in a language that isn't English as well. And these are all the barriers that someone can face as an immigrant or just as a person of color, that has a lot of additional considerations to take while thinking about receiving services.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because language services and language problems also hinder a lot of people from seeking services. It makes definitely as a deterrent. So I'm glad that your organization is able to provide those services. Vedika, I just want to rope Vedika in and see if she has observations and questions for both of you.
So, yeah, first of all, I'm having the first-hand experience of discussing such an important topic because I really feel that we don't know how much it is spread in our society. So we need to discuss, we need to talk about that. So thank you, Shalini, thank you, Prabha and Bindu, for bringing up this topic and discussing so openly about it and giving the resources with which everybody who is suffering or some friend or something can approach and get the help they really needed. So, with that, listeners, let me remind you that you are listening to Illuminating Mind Matters with Basant. And if there is something happening around you, if something which you want us to discuss on our show, the best way is write to us info@basantnow.org. Once more, it's info@basantnow.org. Or just log on to Basant's website, which is basantnow.org, or just give them a call 510-770-6223. When something is happening and we don't start talking about it, that is the first step we are missing out. So let's not miss out on that important step. So contact Basant once more. It's info@basantnow.org. And if you would like to know more about Narika and how to contact them, the website would be narika.org. Narika.org is the website. You'll get all the contact information and how to approach them. With that, Shalini, over to you. Let's continue our important discussion.
Thank you, Vedika, for reminding the listeners how to contact us and how to contact Narika. You brought up, Bindu and Prabha, both of you brought up about the shame and stigma around domestic violence. And I was wondering about confidentiality. How does your organization address confidentiality?
Yes, excellent question. Every time someone reaches out to our organization, whether it is through our website or our phone number, all of these conversations are kept confidential and private. And we will only disclose that information when the person when the person talking to us about their experience is asking us to disclose it. So an example of this could be if a client tells us, hey, I want you to share this information to a lawyer so that they can represent my case for free. Those are instances that we would share because we have explicit consent of that person. But other than that, as a default, 100% of the cases, the information is kept private and confidential. I know there's a lot of myth around, well, if we call a domestic violence agency, does it mean that it will get escalated to law enforcement? Does it mean that it will get escalated to immigration? Because there are cases where our clients are calling us and they're undocumented, or they're afraid that their spouse will lose their job because it will go to law enforcement. But all of this, again, is as far as Narika is concerned, really all that information stays with Narika and with your caseworker, and none of that information is shared with anyone else for any reason other than with your explicit written permission.
That is good to know. So it brings me to the next question of safety. It's like people talk about, if I'm going to approach an organization, they will keep my information confidential, but what about my safety? What about the safety of my loved ones?
When we think about safety, I would say Narika really works on a process of having the survivor choose what safety means to them. Because safety means a lot of different things to different people. For some people, it might mean, hey, there are firearms in the home. I need to know what to do. That comes up. For other people, safety is, I want to be financially stable. And that is what security and safety means. So really, when a person reaches out to Narika, you will have a non-judgmental, compassionate advocate, exactly like Prabha, speak to you, understand what your needs are, understand what safety means to you, and really support you with that through that journey. Really, most of our clients that are working with us are with us for, say, a couple of years, because safety is not an immediate thing. You don't turn on a button and you're safe immediately. It often a series of conversations and a series of discussions. And so safety really, the survivor is kept centered in those discussions. Safety is not what I think safety should mean for you. Safety is really what you think safety means for you and how we can support you through that process.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. I mean, that was good information. What are some of the challenges faced by the immigrant survivors of domestic violence?
Just the cultural framework and the cultural ecosystem is a challenge that comes up where when you're sometimes reaching out to an organization that doesn't understand how, say, your in-laws play a role, dowry plays a role. There's so many of these other factors that are so specific to our Indian, Asian, South Asian cultures that really those could be all reasons how when we many times see abuse or stories of abuse, we're hearing from abuse not just from their spouse, but from the extended family as well. And so these are, again, additional challenges that when a survivor reaches out, often if they're reaching out to an organization that doesn't understand that subtext of culture, they may not really understand how to serve this person who is concerned about their parents and their in-laws and this extended structure network as well. So I think these are all kind of other ways that uh, survivors really have additional challenges in reaching out for services.
So here's the question was also along the lines about what can the community do to help this and address this very important topic, you know, given all the challenges that our survivors face.
Yeah.
And as you know, the people who come to seek help are just the tip of the iceberg.
Absolutely.
Most people are suffering in silence because of shame, stigma, you know, fear of loss of immigration status, finances, money, support, a whole bunch of different issues that come up for them. So, what can a community do?
Yeah. I have three tidbits. The first one would be really start immersing yourself and learning about domestic violence, the prevalence, the long-term impacts of domestic violence, not just on the person experiencing it, but their children, their families, generations. There's a lot to be learned about domestic violence. I know a lot of people reaching out often say, it can't happen in the Bay Area, it can't be a thing here. But really, just the frequency of domestic violence is something our communities need to learn and recognize that it's closer to home than we think it is. We might think, oh, it doesn't happen to me and people I know, but really it's closer than we think it is. One of the ways we would recommend that you learn about domestic violence and how you can be an ally is that we have our counselor training that happens once a quarter. It happens virtually, and it is a training that we encourage every community member to get trained in, just to learn about more about domestic violence and how to support. So that's the first thing. Learn about it, think about it, talk about it. Really, you reduce the stigma and the shame the more it comes up to the surface. The second one is donate, make a donation to a nonprofit that works in domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking. These are any amount, your Starbucks amount, any small amount, small or large, is always helpful. It enables organizations like us to continue to do this work for free. It's really difficult to continue to do this work for free for 30 years. And a donation that you make, small or large, really helps us continue to do this work for free. And the third one I'd say is volunteer. There's a lot of different opportunities for you to volunteer with your time and your expertise. A lot of the people that reach out to us say things like, I don't know if my skill makes sense within the domestic violence movement. But if you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, you're a graphic designer, you're a tech expert, whoever you are, there is a place for you in this movement to create safety and community for our groups. And there is a way that you can support, no matter who you are and what your expertise is. So always reach out to a domestic violence agency like Narika and say, I'd like to volunteer sometime. I'd like to learn more and contribute my expertise. And these are ways that small and powerful ways that our communities can be a part of the solution.
Thank you for stating that. And I think I would like to add also a fourth one is for people to speak up. Don't normalize abuse. You know, just because it is common doesn't mean it is normal and okay. So everybody speak up. If you feel there's any kind of physical, emotional, financial abuse going on, speak up and seek help. You don't have to suffer in silence. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you all. That was very wonderful and very insightful. And I'm hoping the listeners will understand more and know more about Narika and also domestic violence. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us or feel free to contact Narika. And for resources and support, all I say people is don't suffer by yourself. There is support out there. And for the others, volunteer, like Bindu said. Get involved, speak up, because that's how this will end. With that, thank you again, and I turn it over to Vedika.
Thank you so much, Bindu and Prabha, for joining us today. And describing these important things in such simpler steps that people can actually think approaching. This is totally doable, what I got from your conversation. So, listeners, if you would like to contact or if you would like to refer somebody to Narika, narika.org would be the best option. There you'll find the number you can call, there you'll find the email address where you can write them. So, narika.org, just remember that. And with that, we are almost out of time for our Illuminating Mind Matters, but we'll see you back next Wednesday, 12:30 p.m. Don't forget to tune in. And if you want to know more about Basant, basantnow.org would be the website. 510-770-0821, or if you want us to discuss something further, basantnow.org would be the email address where you can write to us. With that, thank you, ladies. Thank you, everyone. This is RJ Vedika signing off. Ji Ja.